Dewi is here, and if not, someone from the team, please.
Thank you. Very good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, really well. Thank you.
Yeah, very good afternoon, very good morning, and very good to see everyone again. And since we have many Indonesian participants, let me speak in Bahasa because we also have an excellent interpreter here. So why we don't use the good interpretations? Anyway, I'd like to welcome Pak Arif dari KLHK dan semua perwakilan Pemda Pemkot di Indonesia dan semua partner dari KRIK. Selamat siang, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Senang sekali kita bisa berkumpul lagi siang ini ya. Kelihatannya semua cerah ini karena mungkin sudah dapat vaksin ya. Maybe some of you the vaccine already, that's why I see a lot of smiling faces. Ya. So anyway, sudah, oke. Pertama-tama ini juga sekali lagi terima kasih ya kita bisa berkumpul lagi dan saya juga ingin mengingatkan bahwa KRIK ini sudah dimulai tahun awal 2020 dan membantu 10 kota di Indonesia untuk merumuskan rencana aksi daerah atau RAD terkait kota yang berketahanan melalui pengembangan, pengetahuan dan peningkatan kapasitas aparat TNI. Terus kita juga tahu bahwa KRIK membantu kota-kota 10 percontohan ini untuk memanfaatkan anggaran ya, memanfaatkan anggaran kota secara strategis terkait strategi mitigasi dan adaptasi perubahan iklim mencapai tujuan yang diinginkan. Tetapi harapan kami semua kita akan juga mengeluarkan konkret ya konkret action yang bisa dikerjakan baik oleh kota tersebut dengan bantuan pasti dari instansi terkait maupun KLHK dan juga bekerja sama secara baik untuk KRIK program ini. Saya juga tadi sampaikan bahwa KRIK ini didanai oleh Uni Eropa dan bekerja sama dengan baik dengan Adaptation. Saya lihat Mbak Indah di sini juga dan ini penting sekali ya karena kita tahu bahwa climate change ini perlu diatasi secara efisien dan efektif ya. Pada lokakarya siang ini strategis ya, isu-isu strategis yang diangkat adalah mengenai tema adaptasi perubahan iklim pada kawasan pesisir. Ini membahas juga strategi maupun prioritas. Pasti banyak dari kota yang hadir di sini yang daerahnya di sekitar pesisir. Dan selain membahas strategi, juga kita ingin melihat juga prioritas ya seputar kondisi kerentanan dan risiko dari perubahan iklim ini. Ini semua guna mengurangi dampak negatif dari kejadian banjirop misalnya maupun dari kenaikan muka air laut terutama kota-kota yang berada di wilayah hilir maupun di pesisir. Kalau kita lihat dari struktur ya atau topografi di Indonesia, kita tahu negara Indonesia ini merupakan negara kepulauan. Kita punya pulau lebih dari 10.000 dengan panjang garis pantai nomor 2 terpanjang di dunia, jadi nomor 2 terpanjang di dunia, nomor 1 adalah Kanada, yaitu sepanjang yang kita punya 180.000 kilometer. Kondisi ini kita bisa melihatnya sebagai peluang, walaupun pasti banyak tantangan ya untuk melakukan coastal management ini. Dan kita juga tahu di saat bersamaan selain ada kita lihat ada potensi maupun peluang, kita juga melihat tantangan-tantangan itu maupun faktor-faktor risiko terhadap dampak perubahan iklim ini. Kalau kita lihat kajian Bappenas, National Planning Development Agency of Indonesia 2018, disebutkan bahwa lebih dari 10% garis pantai tersebut rentan terhadap kenaikan muka air laut dan gelombang ekstrim. Di Jakarta sendiri lensa sidang sudah cukup lumayan tinggi ya. dan sebagian besar kota Indonesia berada di wilayah pesisir. Jadi mengapa siang ini kita bertemu lagi untuk membahas adaptasi measures terutama di daerah pesisir. Bagi kota pesisir, dampak perubahan iklim sangat terlihat jelas ya, tadi dari kenaikan muka air laut, gelombang ekstrim, abrasi, longsor, serta banjirop. Perubahan iklim laut ini juga berdampak di wilayah daratan ya, seperti perubahan temperatur, curah hujan, dan arah angin. Dari berbeda-beda situasi ini, potensi dampak perubahan iklim dapat kita bisa proyeksikan ya, sebetulnya sama-sama potensi dampak perubahan iklim di daerah pesisir, sehingga kita bisa menyusun rencana aksi yang bagus ya untuk meminimalisasikan risiko-risiko tersebut. Namun kita juga tahu kapasitas kota berbeda-beda, sehingga banyak sekali kapasitas kota yang masih sangat terbatas. Karena aksi perubahan iklim syarat dengan pertimbangan ilmiah ya, tetapi yang perlu adalah political will dari kepala daerahnya, serta kekuatan dari institusi tersebut. Jadi dan lagi tantangan yang ada adalah pendanaan. Ini juga kita alami bukan hanya di kota-kota di Indonesia saja, tetapi hampir di seluruh dunia. Mobilization of resources is something that is really needed and is quite important. So melalui KRIK ini gap yang akan kita coba atasi bersama-sama ya, melalui serangkaian pelatihan, penyusunan CAPS, yaitu Climate Action Plans, yang akan kita mulai tahun ini. Tapi saya punya message di sini bahwa kita ingin bukan hanya studi, bukan hanya action plans, yang kita inginkan adalah aksi yang bisa diwujudkan bersama-sama dan aksi itu harus dieksekusi. Itu mungkin pesan saya, dan melalui CAP ini ya kita harapkan kita punya langkah konkret dan terukur untuk mengurangi tingkat kerentanan dan meningkatkan kapasitas adaptasi masyarakat pesisir ini. Akhir kata saya ucapkan terima kasih sekali lagi kepada narasumber maupun perwakilan pemerintah kota dan daerah yang hadir di sini, dan semua KRIK partner, dan juga Pak Ledeh ya telah mendukung kegiatan juga dari ELIG. Saya lihat Wisnu ada juga, dan sekali lagi semoga diskusinya efektif dan ada transfer of knowledge ya dari partner kami, dan sekali lagi selamat berdiskusi. Akhir kata selalu jaga kesehatan, jangan lupa senyum terus ya, karena if you smile your immune system will be higher, so don't forget always to smile. You can smile behind your mask as well. So thank you very much. Have a good discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernadia. It's really a pleasure to have you presenting and introducing this meeting, and thank you also for reminding us that the CRIC project needs to bring concrete solutions and implementation, and be useful for the implementation in the cities. We are here today to also start the, not the transfer, but maybe the exchange of knowledge. So this is why we are also really pleased to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Marc Igigabel, who is a Deputy Head of Division at CEREMA in France, and who's working on an integrated approach, but on the concrete side, so more from the engineering side, and in link with the implementation for French organizations and more broadly in Europe. Marc, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Pascaline. Thank you for your brilliant introduction. I hope that you hear me well. Yes, okay. I am a marine engineer and researcher, and I worked with Youssef Diab on this topic. So I will share my screen. I can't do it. I can't share my screen. So maybe somebody could help me for that.
No problems.
I will try again. No.
You should be able to now.
Okay. Oh yes, that's perfect. Okay, thank you very much. I will put it on a full screen. Yes, that's it. So you can see my screen, I guess now. So I am very pleased today to speak with Indian and Indonesian about resilience against this coastal hazard. And we certainly need to search for integrated approach on this thematic. After presenting you fundamentals on coastal hazards and the effects of climate change, I will present you some protection strategies with two fundamental questions: why an integrated approach, and how to define a relevant integrated approach. In fact, we need still sectoral approaches about hazard protection system, available resources, and also unified approaches for better adaptation to global changes. So all this may seem a bit abstract for you, but you will see that it's very concrete. So first, the fundamentals of coastal hazards and the effects of climate change. Many regions around the world face two types of coastal hazards: flood hazard, which means marine submersion, and generally it occurs when there is a storm event, and erosion hazard, which is a more progressive phenomenon that can accelerate when there is also storm. But there are other hazards that can be even more difficult to manage, such as dune mobility, and as you know very well in Jakarta, soil subsidence. The first idea when we try to deal with coastal hazard is to use structural measures against I hear some noise, sorry, just waiting a bit. So against coastal flood hazards, we use levee system management, and against erosion hazard, we use shoreline management. But in the following, we will consider globally coastal hazard management measures. If we have a look on the past, you know, of course, that storms in the Bay of Bengal are the worst in the world, because the Bay of Bengal account for 7 of the 10 deadliest hurricanes, typhoon or cyclones in the recorded history. So especially there was the Indian cyclone of 1839 and the Ebola cyclone in 1970, which you can see some picture on the screen, trajectory in the middle and the images on the right. In the coastal hazard, we need also to include tsunamis, and of course you all remember this terrible tsunami in 2004 with massive tsunami waves up to 30 meters. The year after, in 2005, Katrina has hit New Orleans. There were a lot of breaches in the flood protection system, and 80% of New Orleans was flooded. So now let's have a look to the future. Of course, the future, the context is climate change. If you have not read the last report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the special report on the ocean and cryosphere in the changing climate, I encourage you to read it, especially the summary for policy maker. It's a brilliant document. I have here reported a few information. First, about the exposure. The costs are home to approximately 28% of the global population, including 11% living on land less than 10 meters above sea level. What are the main effects of climate change? It's the global mean sea level that is rising, and the ocean is warming. And the second effect is maybe even more important than the first, because with the ocean, the temperature of the ocean that is rising, then I am hearing the translation. I am sorry to stop a moment, but yes. So with the temperature of the ocean rising, sorry, then storms, hurricane become stronger, and storm surge becomes stronger also. So you have here on the picture a picture with all the water, heat, carbon dioxide transfer. That's schematic, but it helps to understand that climate change is a global phenomenon, and there are many components and effects that occur simultaneously. People in coastal areas face the greatest exposure to ocean changes. Poor and marginalized people are particularly vulnerable. More globally, ocean and cryosphere changes interact with each of the Peace and Prosperity United Nations Sustainable Goals, which means that we are really, that an integrated approach is really needed. We will see how to go in this direction after. I must insist on one of the forecast of the special report on ocean and climate and cryosphere. It's the B3 indication or forecast. Extreme sea level events that are historically rare, once per century in the recent past, are projected to occur frequently, at least one per year, at many locations by 2050, in all scenarios, especially in tropical regions, because the temperature becomes higher. So that's why climate change represents such a high threat for some country in the near future. Here is a map from the same source, the IPCC report, special report, where we can see the global distribution of low-lying islands and coast that are particularly at risk with the sea level rise. Indonesia and India are, of course, concerned by this. They are small islands, coastal megacities, deltas, and low elevation coastal zones. So now I will speak about protection strategies. The first question is why an integrated approach, and then how to define a relevant integrated approach. As a starting point, there are protection systems. As I told before, that's the first idea we have. And indeed, coastal protection systems are of vital importance for many communities because we have built we have built environments behind these levees. So we use levee for dike to protect against floods. And protection system manager challenges are to maintain the system performance with limited material and human resources, and to adapt the system in response to crisis situations or other changes. Historically, here you have a fluvial levee. Basic technical approaches were preferred. It means that when new flood occurred that was higher than the level of the levee, then the levee was raised. But the risk was also increased in case of breach. So why go further? Because technical responses of rising embankments can become too expensive and too dangerous. On the illustration, you have New Orleans topography, and you can see the situation with a floor, the land that is at a level lower than the sea, especially when there is a storm surge. Climate change will increase the intensity of extreme events at many sites, especially on coast. And under these conditions, additional efforts should be made to define adaptation strategies, but without lowering the standards, maintaining levels of protection. So we have to invest, but we have still to keep the protection. How to go further? Research can be based on the concept of system resilience. Here we have the IPCC definition. We can read it together because it's an important definition. The ability, so the system resilience is the ability of a system and its component parts to anticipate, absorb, accommodate, or recover, that are goals, to recover from the effects of a hazardous event in a timely and efficient manner, including through ensuring the preservation, restoration, or improvement of its essential basic structures and functions. And here there are means. So we can distinguish both. And the importance of temporality and efficiency is highlighted in this definition, which means that we must be careful to do not too much too early or too little too late. That's the idea. Now, how to transform the system? Because that is the idea. When we are when we have just a protection system that we are preserving or restoring, then we can speak about engineering resilience, and it's achieved by structural strength and reparation. When the context is stable, it can be suitable. But when the context is changing, and in the context of climate change, we need more improvement for adaptation. And that's what can be called ecologic resilience, because with ecology, we achieve more transformation. So on the illustration, you can see that we have to avoid to go from a desirable regime to an undesirable regime. And if the risk is become too high, then we can't cope with it if the system is kept. So we have to change the system, and that's a dotted line. We have to move from the continuous line to stay in the desirable regime with the dotted line. The translation of this idea, first translation of this idea, that is really focused on flood, and that's one kind of risk. There are many risks. We will discuss about this. Flood risk management typically include protection measures and measure to increase the resilience to residual risk. So on the picture, you can see many steps. On the left, you have a high risk that will be first reduced by reducing the flood hazard, by restoring wetlands, for example, or other green infrastructure. Then you have the second step, where you will try to protect against flood. So you can build embankments and flood barriers, but it's not always a better solution. Then you can regulate land use and put setback lines, restriction, and to have building restrictions and so on. And there are still other measures that concern people to raise awareness and preparedness, and with emergency response, insurance, and so on, you can, and recovery plans, you can mitigate the residual risk. So that's very important to have this to keep this in mind, but it's not sufficient, because the risk there is not only flood risk, there are other risks, and it's more complex than this. That's why we can also find some ideas in urban resilience, with urban resilience and the framework of ARAP. Then on the left, you can see that we will consider we have a much global approach with leadership and strategy, health and well-being, economy and society, infrastructure and ecosystems. So to have to solve some problems, we need sometimes to have a population with a better health and well-being, or to have a good leadership. And that's not only a matter of infrastructure. And societies that is poor won't react better, as well as society that is rich. And so there are also some resilience attributes accompanying this first picture, and these attributes are reflective, robust, flexible, integrated, resourceful, redundant, inclusive. So we can speak about this in details after, but we can't. I can't comment all here. So now I will give you some insight in the sectoral approaches, and especially about hazard protection system, available resources. So the resilience can be need to have better knowledge for the hazard, and there can be many types of hazard. We need to have a good knowledge of the protection system itself, and a clear definition is necessary. On the picture, you have a system that is in red lines and black lines and green lines. It depends on the functions. And we need also to have to keep in mind that we need resources, and we need to know what are the available resources, human, financial, and material. Indeed, every site is different. There are many different configurations. So there are different sources of the hazard. It can come from the sea, but also from the river. When you are on an estuary or a delta, it can come from runoff. So the water can come from every part. It can come also from the sky or from the ground if the table, if the water table is rising. And flooding can also generate other phenomena. Water pressure, humid ground, powerful currents can cause breaches in levees, erosion. It can damage foundations, local infrastructure, can cause mudslides, tree falls, cliff failures, cavity collapses. And in the littoral zone, you will have also coexistence of other phenomena, because when there is marine submersion, there is a storm, so high winds, waves breaking inland of so waves that are breaking inland of tidal areas, beach and dune erosion. So the situation needs always to be analyzed precisely. Each site is different.
Harus selalu dianalisis dengan tepat karena kondisi setiap tempat itu berbeda.
Doing this kind of work. And the link between flood and protection system is not exclusive.
Kita harus menautkan antara sistem banjir dan sistem proteksi banjir.
The main hazard. And the combination of circumstances is very daunting. There are some cascade effects and combination effects. The link between protection system and available resources is also to be studied. So we need we need not only technical recommendations, but we need to develop operational tools, especially supply challenge to address supply challenges for materials, but also to evaluate, to assess financial costs and environmental impacts, especially when there is a project. We need to try to assess the global cost of the project, not only investment, but also in maintenance costs, because on the long term, maintenance cost will always be higher than investment cost. And when we compare solutions, then we often conclude that nature-based solutions are better on an economic perspective. If we look at the economy, nature-based solutions are better than technical solutions. Especially on the shoreline, we need to have consideration of the gross sedimentary functioning. So we need to mobilize other disciplines than engineering, and particularly economics, ecology, and long-term to define long-term strategies. So here I have identified some potential developments for if we consider our needs to find new tools or new methodologies. And what we conclude is that we need to supplement large-scale analysis with more local analysis to take into account a greater diversity of phenomena. We need to offer more adaptability in the definition of protection system. So when there is a new event, then we have to ask ourselves, do we need to change the system? We need to give more weight or to embed some scientific fields, especially economy and ecology. And we need to analyze resources at appropriate scales to develop operational tools. For example, to have some armor stones, which are often used for hydraulic works. Then we need to know where are the available resources. I will end with the last part. It's an attempt to find a unified approach for a better adaptation to global changes in the context of climate change and also ecological transition. What we can say is that we need more data related to risk management and also the preservation of the environment. The digital transition also means that we have more and more data. You are often aware of this when you work on these subjects. And the numerous and heterogeneous data must be accessible and organized in such a way that the mass of information does not become paralyzing for decision making. So the idea to cope with this problem is to design databases that are adapted to the developed methodologies and vice versa. We need operational tools that are developed in normal circumstances and can be used also in crisis situation. When you work every day with some tools, it means that when there is a crisis, you will be able to use these tools. If you use operational tools only when there is a crisis, then it can be much more difficult. Here you have a map that's just an illustration of a research program on what created risk, where we have analyzed data on the flooded areas with the stakes that are indicated on the same maps as the protection system. And that's just to indicate that in the way we have led this research program, we were respecting the attributes of resilience as described in the framework. So we try to have an integrated, robust, reflexive and resourceful and inclusive approach. Inclusive means yes that we have associated many partners to have a collective approach. So in conclusion, our flood risk management should adapt to profound changes in the environment. We have technological revolutions. If we produce guides and operation tools, then we should encourage the utilization of various disciplines. Strengthen the solidarity between actors is important. And it's not enough to produce some methodology. It's essential to disseminate knowledge, to take ownership of the developed methodologies, and to revise governance arrangement to encourage increasing the expertise shared with levy managers. Thank you for your attention. If you have some question, I can try to answer.
Thank you very much, Mark. It was really clear, really complete. I think it gives a lot of insight on how to develop an integrated management. I'm sure there are many questions because one of the challenges, of course, will be to adapt all these methodologies also to the local context. And that's also something you approached in your presentation. I see there is one question actually from the city of Ternate, Mr. Yakub Abbas. If you would like to ask your question. I see that you raise your hands. Or anybody else?
I will keep,
yes.
I will keep my screen shared, except if you prefer that to have a discussion with link with.
Yeah, you can. We can keep it for the questions from the audience before we go. We can stop it when we go to the panel discussion. Thank you for this. So yes.
Sorry, may I ask a question to my colleague?
Yes, sure.
Usually when we work together, Mark, we have very nice discussions about the complementarities between the solutions. And in very short sentence, you said, and I think it's risky to say it this way, that the nature-based solutions are sometimes much better than heavy infrastructure. What do you think about this? Can you clarify a little bit more about what you think? Is it from the point of view of integrated approach or in general? Because for me, it might be very complementary, both solutions. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's really a very important question. What I would say is that when you have a levy system, then the main idea, the most important thing is to know what is the performance of this system. What this system, if there is a storm, then you have to assess your system to know what will be the limit of the system, so that you can implement the other measures that are not structural, or there are some that can be considered as structural, as for example, building restrictions can also be considered as structural measures. But the idea is really to have complementarity set measures. So levies are, if we had to rebuild entirely our cities from scratch, certainly that if we had a good knowledge of the risk, we wouldn't build so many levies, because when you build a levy and you have some, you will settle some stakes behind, then the risk appears. Levy alone, there is no risk, and often levies are built when there are some because there are some culture, or there are some stakes that are not so vulnerable as building on environment. So the problem is what you put behind levies, and you have to. So you have to be aware of what you do, and as you know, the construction of cities are not always very well planned. We consider in the world that there is 90% of the construction of cities that are not planned. It means that if there is no real planning, the risk won't be very well managed.
Yes, and that's very interesting, this part. And one of my questions will be, how do you combine short-term planning, so it means like preparedness, disaster management, and long-term adaptive planning? So, because as we see, the land use requires a lot of investments. We look at decades ahead. So how would you combine the let's say, the time scale for cities? And my second question would be, the nature-based solutions. We talk a lot about planting mangroves, ecological restoration. Do you think it's working? I mean, according to your research.
Yes. So for the first question, short-term and long-term measures. I have what I would say is that when you invest in levies, or when you invest in building, you must be aware of the risk, and you should adapt your investment to this risk. I mean that if a building is at a place that is prone at risk, then if you make some work on it to improve it, or to rebuild it, you have to adapt the construction to this risk. So you know that investment in building, and it's also the case in levies, that's a huge investment. There is maybe 1% of the building in a city that is replaced every year. So it means that each time that you do this kind of work, you have to have a global approach, and that's why economy is very important, because economy will help you to quantify the effort and to compare solutions. So short-term and long-term, I would say that except for some emergency measures, we should always have a long-term perspective. And we have produced in and I was the main manual on that's written in French, of course, that it's about the cost of protection against coastal hazards. And what we say is that every dollar you put on the protection, you should know what is the effect in the 50 next years, because if you don't have an approach with a project with lifetime structure, then you can put money at the wrong place. So the economy is important and ecology is also important, and that's the second your second question. To maintain, to preserve mangrove and natural places. That's really important, because if you replace mangrove or natural environments by a built environment, then often it will be a place that is prone at risk, and so you will increase your exposure. You know that there is a huge pressure in big, especially in big cities, to use the last part of the territories that is natural. But if it's still natural, it's often that the risk is higher. So the first idea is not to increase the exposure, and the second idea is that these natural places have an important role in the functioning of the levee system. A levee system is not only, I will show you another picture. A levee system is not only made of levees. It's also places where the water can stay at land. And so it will stay as long as the tide is high, and when the tide becomes low, then you can evacuate the water. And these natural places have this role of storage of the water that has entered the system, and that's a fundamental role if we don't want to have water arriving on the more vulnerable.
Thank you very much. We have two questions from the audience. We will start with Mr. Fikri from the Environmental Agency of Mataram. Pak Fikri, do you hear us? If you can raise your question.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask about the coastal problem in my city, and maybe also experienced by some cities in Indonesia and also in some developing countries. First of all, I would like to say good morning for those who in Europe right now, and selamat sore untuk teman-teman yang saat ini menyimak acara ini. Perkenalkan, nama saya Fikri dari LH Kota Mataram. I would like to ask in English, as I mentioned before, in Mataram, the threat is not only come from the issues of the raise of sea level, but also come from the land itself, especially from the rivers. We have 4 rivers that crossing the city of Mataram. Unfortunately, from these rivers, we got the garbage and waste every day. That's maybe also experienced by some city in Indonesia regarding the waste that flows to the rivers. it is also very unfortunate for us because Mataram, especially, we have sunset view. Not many city in Indonesia have sunset view, but Mataram really has that one. Unfortunately, our coast in some time, for example, in monsoon or the rain season, the flood also flooding our the waves flooding our coastal area. So maybe this is kind of things that I would like to raise in this discussion, and I hope that the speakers from Europe maybe have some advice for us and the solution. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pafitri, for your question. I'm sure that Mark will answer. But let me collect the second question. There is a second question from Mr. Alfian from the Environmental Agency of Kendari. Mr. Alfian, if you would like to raise your question.
All right. Thank you, Pascaline. Am I correct?
Yes.
And good morning, everyone in Europe, and good evening for those who in Indonesia right now. So, with regard to hazard management, that I think the integrating multi-hazard management, risk management into government plans is essential. But in fact, that in the context of Indonesia, there is a big challenge that every single local government are facing on. So I mean, like sometimes this integration kind of like sometimes conflicting what the local government are pursuing to, like their priority programs sometimes uh, are not able to be integrated with, like multi-hazard risk management. So that's kind of like problems that many local governments in Indonesia especially are facing on. So I would like to ask Mark if there are any like best practices around the world that the tropical countries, archipelago countries like Indonesia has best practices to facilitate kind of like integration or integrating multi-hazard risk management into the local government planning. That's the first one. The second one is that preparing community to be resilient over the climate change impact, particularly the product of that changes are like hazards, multi-hazards, particularly flooding. So I think coordination and collaboration among the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, are pivotal or essential in this case. But in reality, sometimes communities are neglected, apostrophe, to be involved in multi-stakeholder event or forum to discuss multi-hazard risk management plans or programs. So, but on the other hand, community, particularly those who are vulnerable to the climate change impacts or hazards or flooding, should be involved in the planning process or implementing the mitigation plan or adaptation plan, so that they will be, I mean, the communities will be possessing kind of like good knowledge, good skills, or good response into towards the hazards. So coordination and collaboration or joint actions among the stakeholders, including communities who are vulnerable, is a must. That's my opinion. So that's again, I would say that the problem or the example or instance in Indonesia, sometimes the communities who are vulnerable to the climate change impact tend to be neglected in the multi-stakeholder forum. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Your question is really relevant on the questions of governance and stakeholders engagement. Mark, would you like to answer to both questions? Or there were many questions.
I will try, but there will probably be some compliment to bring to my answer. So there are two main questions: multi-hazard and how to associate stakeholders. On the first thematic, multi-hazard, there are some fundamentals in the planning of a territory that can help to deal or to cope with many hazards. I will provide you with one example. You know that for the water that is flowing in cities, we will use pipes, more and more pipes, and instead, if we were letting the water being infiltrated, if you privilege the infiltration of water on the ground without sending it in pipes, then you will have less innovation because of less runoff, and you will also have a better functioning on an ecological perspective. And in Europe, and especially in France, we consider not only many hazards together, but we consider the protection against hazards and especially flood, and the preservation of the environment. So we are dealing, for example, and there are some other programs in Europe, for example, programs that was, which name was More Room for the River in the Netherlands, where you will, when you have time to think about the planning of a territory or about the planning of a town, then you can take good decisions. When you wait for that something bad event occur, then you will take decision during the event and just after, and then it will often be bad decisions. So my answer for multi-hazard is that you have to have a quiet analysis and to consider also ecological functions. Often the hazards are worse because the environment is degraded. If somebody wants to add something to this first question, I can let the floor to some other participant, or I can bring a first answer to the second question about the association.
Yes. I can add one thing that you have for this multi-hazard issue. It's a very important topic, and sometimes the approach for this consider this is related to the combination of hazard by using a probabilistic approach, but it might be very useful for only structures, for only let's see, civil engineering elements. But to apply them to the whole city management, it's going to be very complexity issues, and to my knowledge, there's no reliable modeling trying to understand the behavior of a city under multi-hazards, because these multi-hazards have to be quantified, have to be combined, and the interdependencies between the infrastructure and in the cities are very complicated. This is one of the major topics at this time in research in Europe and in other countries about this interdependencies of systems, of urban systems in cities. And this is from technical point of view. Then from social point of view, multi-hazards has to be prepared in a different way in comparison with, for example, a flooding risk only, because you cannot prepare the population for all the hazards at the same time. You have to give the good knowledge in the simplified way to do it. So this is something I understand that the question is very important, but unfortunately, as Mark said, the research on this is undergoing, and cannot say that we have a black box giving the solution directly. We don't, to my knowledge, we don't have it.
Thank you, Youssef, for this input, and thank you, Mark, for answering the questions. Just crossing my mind, I think that the difficulty, and I agree with you, like if you plan the territory better, we will reduce the risks and hazards, especially in the ecological part. On the other hand, we should not forget the governance, as Mr. Alfian also reminded, the involvement of communities, stakeholders in a transparent way. The difficulties may be also in the future to manage the unpredictable, and we see it in the current pandemics that how difficult it is to manage unpredictability. And as climate change will occur, we will increase, of course, this context of unpredictable unpredictability, which will make it difficult to plan in the medium run. And yes, so all these, of course, is very interesting. And as you all say, that there is no, of course, easy and tailor-made solutions or one-size-fits-all solutions, which will be adaptable for all the cities. However, and what you propose in your integrated approach is very interesting, as it's really tackling all the different aspects and all the different topics on how a city can grasp the risk and adapt, at least in the planning and in the infrastructure, in the ecological management, also taking into account the economy, the governance, how it can also increase the resilience of the system. Thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. So I think now we can stop the presentation. Please stay with us, because there will be questions from the audience probably later. We should come back to your presentation. Now we are really pleased to welcome our panelists. Yeah, Professor Youssef, you're a bit impatient. So our panelists today, we are really pleased to welcome Mr. Arif Wibowo, representative of the Ministry of the Environment and Forests. We are really pleased to welcome Professor Youssef, who's been giving some inputs, as well as Vishnu Rao, who's an expert from the All India Institute of Local Self-Governance. If you have other questions, please keep them a little bit for later. So now I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe give some inputs within 5 minutes time each. Mr. Arif Wibowo, if you would like to speak, the floor is over to you. Thank you for joining this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascaline. Should I give the comment or just introduce myself first?
Yes, please introduce yourself, and do not hesitate to react on the presentation and on the parents.
Thank you very much for the clarifications. Good morning, colleagues in Europe, and good afternoon, selamat sore untuk kawan-kawan Indonesia. I was enjoy very much this discussion. It's I think it's there are many basic issues that maybe I can share something based our experience in Indonesia and also my experience, you know, in connection with these issues. There are 6 questions. Sorry, I'm now in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry under the Directorate for Climate Change Adaptation. Yeah? I'm dealing with climate change adaptation. I'm the Deputy Director for Vulnerability Assessment, something like that, yeah, to make easy for you. Okay, quite many questions that I already captured in the issues. One is regarding the how to integrate into the development planning, especially for how can government can provide this what's capacity on that. I think it's very big issues. And the second one is dealing with the priorities, and then there is a question regarding the best practices, and then also related to the early warning system and smart technologies, also how to integrate this. And then what about the community involvement in these issues? And then the last, I will provide some recommendation. Pascaline and other colleagues, I think I will start with my first issues regarding the what government can do to integrate these issues into the planning, more adaptive planning, as you say. It's mentioned in this question. Indeed, we know that this is our, I think, our government task to mainstream these issues into a national development process. And then how to translate into that local level, cities and other area. So at national level, international level, I think we have already a technical guideline. We know that there is a NAPS guidelines. How can we, as a government, can translate this NAPS guideline into national guideline? So how can we provide environment for that? For example, now we, as a part of Indonesian commitment to Paris Agreement, we already started with development of a national roadmap on adaptation as an umbrella used by all stakeholders in the country. So based on that, and then we later on we will try to use this as a guidelines to translate into national level by using the NAPS guidelines. And then in our experience now, we already provide a kind of a technical regulation under the ministry as a technical guideline how to develop climate action plan, and then put into the in mainstreaming into the development plan, especially for local government, which is dealing with time scale, which is short term or long term or medium term. And even we also encourage to put into the national development plan 5 years cycle. So we fortunately we now already integrated this climate change action into 5 years national development plan, or RPGM, 5 years. Yes, and then what we do now? We are providing a kind of capacity building to introduce this guideline, and then we also provide national tools, especially related to vulnerability information system, vulnerability and risk information system, as a basic science that can be used as a starting point for local government as well as national government. And then indeed the best practices also we have to put into action. How can we develop a kind of pilot projects, providing pilot projects such as creek projects. Thank you for that. I think this is a good project, creek project. How can we try to mainstream this climate change adaptation into local development. And then now we also have an incentive scheme now, especially for community action related to climate action. We call it Proclaim, maybe this word already known. Proclaim is a community initiative on climate action. It's already started since 2012, already 9 years, yeah. And then MONEF system, I think we have to provide a kind of that system. Now we have a national registry system, and then later on we can develop into the verification system. We already started the verification system for this community initiative. So as a part of incentive, our ministry provide a kind of awards to selected local action, local initiatives. And indeed, we have to involve the local universities. It's one of our big issues also, because the expertise is there in the local area, the local universities, not always at central level. So we try to involve them in the cycle of this process, and other partners as well, including hopefully including private, for example. It's quite long anyway. But and the second question regarding the priority, again we have to identify the priority based on what? Under the guideline, we provide how to start with. We have to identify what issues that already the most impacted issues by climate change as well as disaster, whether dealing with a flood, as mentioned before, flood, maybe sea level rise, and so on and so on. And then what is the main issues on the development? In Indonesia, we try to start with the basic needs related to the development, like water, energy, and then food, and then food security, and then health also, without thinking about considering ecosystem issues. So how can we start to understand these values of impact? Because if we talk about potential money, economic loss, it's very easy for us to let the local decision maker or even national decision maker to understand the potential loss. I think it's a very critical point to set priority. So when we already discussed about the multi-hazard and so on, but I think we should come back with the priority. And then regarding the best practices, it depends on the what's level. I think as local level, we have thousands initiative from communities already in our database. How can we manage this information as good practices, best practices, and can be multiplied into other location? At local government, I think we have many examples already to put into the local planning, like in Indonesia. Each part of Indonesia, we have pilot projects in East Nusa Tenggara, in Maluku, and then even in Kendari also we have pilot projects for mainstreaming into the local city government in Kendari. Pak Alfian, I think we have that's best practices. I mean, in terms of integrating the climate change adaptation into the local planning, and many others. I think we have many best practices in terms of local government mainstreaming these issues. You can talk later. And then smart technologies and early warning system. I think we should start with again a priority again, and now, because this is very critical point. What is the most critical issues that we should provide information for early action? I think because it's the most easier one to talk about the impact of climate change is dealing with disaster. It's very easy to understand, flood, and then storm and so on. But again, we have to think about slow onset impact also, slow onset event, not only early action, because it's quite late, if you talk about early action, quite late, So how can we put into the planning process? And I think the coordination among the aligned agencies, it's very critical point here. Like here in Indonesia, we have a national disaster agency beside the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So how can we coordinate these issues and then inviting other line ministries, technical ministries, and so on, as well as at local level, I think. Sorry, my masker is moving. And the first issues regarding the community issues. How can the community be better prepared and informed? Again, I think we should involve them in preparing the risk assessment, because at national level in Indonesia we have information at national level, but how the local people understand at their at site level, because Indonesia is a big country also. The resolution of the the picture on the maps is very very big, so we should translate into a local resolution, so it can provide them the precise information, like what is the potential storm for the next 3 days, and then translate into the local action, early action, and so on. So I think this is a very critical point, because we should involve the communities. We have many best practices for sea level rise, for example, as an ocean storm, for example. In Maluku, we already has some local village. We assist them to provide information as well as the procedure, how to engage when they have information related to wave issues regarding the fisheries, for example, when they can go or not go for fishing, for example. And it's very handy information should be provided there. And I think we can expand more on that issues, because it depends on the issue at the local level, I think. And I think the last issues regarding my general recommendation, I think again, as we discussed before, with high level commitment is very important, but how to translate this high level commitment into the policy, into the regulations, as at national as well as subnational. Then second one, I think we need the leaderships. It's a very critical issues, as also raised by Mark also. Leadership is very critical point to enhance stakeholders become the part of the journey, become the part of the resilience process, ownerships, literacy, indicators of climate change adaptation, understanding the vulnerability, understanding the impact, and so forth and so forth. I think this is two big issues that we can recommend to this discussion. And then again, the last point I think I would like to say that not only talking about how to mitigate the negative impact, but also what is the opportunity should be explored dealing with these issues: climate change, adaptation, disasters, and how can we explore the positive positive issues that can be identified. I think that's my my long comment. Pascaline, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very, very good. You answered to all the questions, the priorities, the recommendations, the smart technologies, and also how to work with the stakeholders, get to commitment, and also base future actions on the good practices and the best practices which are also occurring in Indonesia. So thank you very much for your participation. This is really appreciated. Now I will turn to the other panelists. Do not hesitate to answer the questions. Indeed, we will start with Vishnu Rao. Vishnu, you're from Chennai. Maybe you can introduce yourself and react to the presentations and interventions so far, and maybe start also answering some of the questions such as how can governments, including cities, integrate more adaptive planning? Please, Vishnu.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Vishnu Rao. I work with I'm associated with the All India Institute of Local Self-Government. In Chennai, I work with a range of issues from energy, environment, etc. My take on this coastal and climate adaptation strategies is I viewed it from a slightly different perspective from the Indian experience, or to say the Tamil Nadu experience. The first level that the Indian government has did in the 2011 was to introduce the coastal regulation zone notification of 2011, which basically is a zoning law where it put the where they made coastal areas into vulnerable and non-vulnerable areas where developments can take place and cannot take place. This subsequently was kind of changed in 2019, and where critical areas, there was a permission to give critical areas some kind of development priority. So this has had a kind of an impact on the way the coastal development has taken place in India, so to speak. So the adaptation bit of it, I will come to a little later. What has happened over the past 20 years was a number of infrastructure development has taken place around the coast. So one side of the coast is the bay, which is an undulating long stretch of beach, so to speak, one of the longest stretches in India, in the world. The other side is actually the sea, which is not so much of a sandy place, but more on a rocky and terrain, the western side. The eastern side of India, which is the Bay of Bengal, has had a little bit of has had a little bit of as major developments that has taken place around the coast. And some of the so the sand that moves from the south to the north, it is a migratory sand, so to speak, and that same sand that comes from the north to the south during the winters and the summers have are kind of affected by the movement of the sand is actually affected by the coastal developments. So the ports which come up on the sand, come up on the beach, basically prevent the sand from moving from one part of the shore to the other. So that creates a situation where there's coastal erosion on one side of the beach, or one side of the coastal area, while the other coastal area kind of gets an accumulation of sand. So this is some of the kind of a man-made kind of an erosion that we see in India. So the climate adaptation that basically Indian situation does not view the coast from a climate adaptation perspective. It views it from a management perspective, or nor does it doesn't look at it from a protection perspective. So the zoning part of the whole exercise is where coastal zone regulation notifications basically look at. So this is one part of it. So there have been several efforts, like like Mark was saying, about putting levees, putting barriers across areas where there have been more erosion. Because so the idea of how the coast has evolved is in India, basically, if you see, there has been some part where the coast has kind of where the sand has accumulated and created more land, where in some areas around the coast the sand has eroded the land, the water has eroded the land and accumulated more, and as water has made an inroad. So that's where when they put the levees and the dunes and the creating artificial beaches. Now the whole question is the natural bit that Mark was saying about the mangroves. So promotion of mangroves is one of those realities that's happening in Indian eastern side of the Indian coastline, because the number of monsoon the cyclones that take place, the Orissa cyclone that took place in the cyclone Amphiban, basically was a large portion of the coast was protected because of the mangroves that prevented the cyclone from uprooting the nearby villages. So that is one of the real examples of how cyclones have kind of okay. So yeah, then finally I think the idea is then I think I'll stop with this. I think we are short on time. Can share it. Okay, I think we are short on time. I think.
Thank you very much. We'll maybe move to Youssef, but we'll come back to you on other questions on especially how can communities be better informed. I think which is one of the points which came from the questions.
That's where I wanted to come up with because of the coastal.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Vishnu, very much. Youssef, if you'd like to introduce yourself and maybe give your a little bit take on the presentation so far, maybe you can also answer a little bit to the questions which were how can smart technologies and early warning systems integrate multi-hazard risk, which was one of the questions from the panel. Thank you, Youssef.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pascaline. Thanks, Emmanuel, for organizing this event. It's really very nice to see all these people participating and asking questions. Thanks also to Mark for his excellent presentation and for the idea that he's presenting about his research and the role playing by CEREMA. CEREMA is kind of, let's say, engineering companies dedicated to local authorities in France, and they are doing a lot of work specific for the risk, for the urban planning, for the climate change adaptation, for infrastructure management, etc. So I enjoyed really listening to you and gave me many ideas for further research. And also I want to say hi to Mr. Arif Ugo, who was with us. I don't know if he's here or not, because in Click project I enjoyed his presentation a few weeks ago about early warning systems, about the situation in Ternate, Mataram, and Bandar Masin. So myself, I am professor of urban engineering. The word in French is very common use, but in English it means that we are trying to have this integrated approach for the management of cities by integrating infrastructure issues, environmental issues, and also socioeconomic issues. And this is my field, and I have the nicest urban lab in the world because I'm working closely with the city of Paris, as we are. I am the scientific director of this graduate engineering school, and this school is graduating almost all the engineers only working for Paris. So I am not involved directly in the project, but I can observe them and I can give a recommendation on what is the value of research to improve the practices in cities. This is the only thing I know to do in life is urban engineering, and it's enough for me because it's a very good topic for the coming 20-30 years. As it was mentioned by Marc, by Pascaline, by the other speaker, that the climate issues, the climate concerns will change our way of living, our way of dealing with the socio-technical issues, and so on. After this brief introduction, I want to tell you a little bit about my approach for resilience, and then I'll try to answer the question asked by Pascaline about early warning system. I can add, we share, as you know, a lot of things with Mark focused on the infrastructure and the protection systems. But in the resilience cycle, we have this very important component of resistance and it's for the protection. But there's also the other component, which is the crisis management issues. The crisis management issues is that you're, for example, like New Orleans, like Saint Martin, the island of Saint Martin, you have the problem in the city, and you have to try to limit the damages and the consequences. This is something that we are working a lot on it, and it is part for me of the integrated approach of resilience. Then the third component is going to be how to work during the crisis. What kind, for example, in Paris, if we have a flooding, it's very often happening in regular time. We can stop some metro lines, some train lines, and then you open the other for a bigger period because they are less vulnerable, than the others. So this is the second component of our integrated approach for the resilience, is how to do with the crisis management and to maintain an acceptable level of service. And the third one is what to do after the event. And at this time, with my team, we are working on a specific concept developed by UN. The UN is the Build Back Better, and the Build Back Better is the key element for the infrastructure, but also for the whole society. I can recommend you an article done by one of my colleagues, and I am a co-author of it. It was published a few days ago in the journal Sustainability about the Build Back Better of infrastructure for the island of Saint Martin after an important hurricane took place in 2015, and Mark can correct me if it was 14 or 15, I don't know exactly. So these Build Back Better issues are very important for the next period, because an accident, an event, a catastrophe is an opportunity to improve the resistance of the city by thinking about how to improve the infrastructure. So this is our integrated approach for the resilience. It's shared with many other people. I was involved in many times for many projects with the network of 100 resilient cities, and Paris was a part of it. You know all this network is now it stopped. It changed. The name changed to Resilient Cities Network, but they did a huge work with the Rockefeller Foundation about this element. Now, briefly in 2 minutes, I focus on a word that was not used during our discussion, is the fact that all these resilience approaches have to be iterative. That means when you have to learn from what's happening and then you improve. So this is issues that the feedback about the analysis of events will allow to improve the resilience. And this is something very used in urban sustainable development. And it was mentioned that the urban planning and the urban design and the resilience are very important topic in these times. Let's say something that in France, for example, 40% of the lands of the greater Paris area are considered not able to be constructed because the risk of flooding. Now, having new rules, new approach to build in another way with architect, with urban planner, by integrating the resilience will allow to create more value for the land located near the river. So this is very important to see that the resilience is not only a risk management approach, it might have a very added positive value, positive from economical point of view and also from social point of view. I can talk for many hours about the governance, about the relation between the technical system and socio-technical issues. So, but I'm going to stop now, because to answer the last question about the smart technology for the early warning system, maybe Pascal, I say in 2 words, for me, the early warning system have 2 components. Also the technology, but not only the technologies, the awareness that we provided for the population. But for the smart technology, sometimes giving the information on a real-time basis is very useful, and it's very important for the population. To say, for example, Mark, you are coming to visit another village near the Atlantic Ocean. You cannot go now, but you have to stay 2 hours, and after that you can move, because the road is dangerous at this time, and in 2 hours it will be all reopened, and so things will go very well. So this kind of information, sharing the knowledges and the uses, the combined use of Internet of Things and GIS is the key element to share the information and to have good technology. But from my point of view, the technology is not the issue. You have the technology, but now how this technology is shared with the population and with the public people who are in charge of the decision. And maybe it's another topic. We can handle it in the Creek project, because it's a part of the work to be done by University Gustav Eiffel for 2 Indonesian cities.
Thank you, Youssef. That's very interesting. I think you covered some of the questions really well. And also, as you said, we could discuss for a long time about, how we combine these smart technologies, how we can also make them more user-friendly. That's also what you say, and accessible for the population. And also how you coordinate maybe with the meteorological agencies, the disasters agencies, so that you have the information in real time, which is something also, which is, I guess, a challenge from both the technological and an organization point of view. Maybe we can go back to Vishnu to answer these questions. How can communities be better prepared and informed in case of climate hazards? Thank you, especially floods or storms, please.
Yeah. Since I'm based out of Tamil Nadu, Chennai, we are part of a coastal action network. It is an organized community of several CSOs which are working in diverse fields, such as fishermen, in regular NGO related CSO awareness building work, human rights, and a wide range of things. So, but all of the main thing is all of them live around the coast. So they have organized themselves as a coastal, it's called CAN, so Coastal Action Network, where they respond to several events, including the tsunami that has happened a couple of decades ago, in the cyclone that has taken place. So they have community level structures where they provide relief operations to these affected communities by engaging, by creating supply lines, by engaging with other CSOs like Consumer Action Group in Chennai to create create this. But other aspect of these kind of flooding and aspects of the policy related and the regulatory aspects that come along with it is also taken care of by networks like Coastal Action Network, where they look at policies and regulations that need climate adaptation or disaster management for that matter. And this is where one of those roles that kind of take place. So one of the videos that I've shared on Emmanuel has shared on chat relates to a smaller network called the Pondicherry Coastal Action Network, which has advocated for change for a beach restoration project in Pondicherry. It has come out as a result of the harbor that has kind of set up there, which has prevented the beach lines from moving forward. So as accumulated sand on the southern side, where the northern side has created a lot of erosion. So the Pondicherry Pondican took upon itself to kind of create artificial beaches and barriers along the coast to mitigate the erosion aspect. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vishnu. We are running a little bit out of time. Is there any urgent question from the audience to the speakers before we will go to our closing session? So I will give the floor 2 minutes to each speaker back for the concluding questions and remarks. But before that, is there maybe any urgent question? Then please raise your hand. No, I don't see any urgent question. Of course, this is only a beginning of the discussion. I hope that there will be more exchange. So now I'm happy to maybe give back the floor to Mr. Arif Wibo, maybe for some concluding remarks, and then we'll go to the other speakers. No. Otherwise, I see there is a question from Mrs. Ibu Vivi. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Yes. About India island, we have issue about coastal abrasion. Some young people have a movement or action to help the coastal by growing mangrove. However, on the other side, also there is a illegal logging happen at the same time. So it seems like there is a lack of ways or not. The effect is really, really small. Well, it's still happening like that. So what can be done?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Maybe you can answer also to this question in your concluding remark. So Ibu Vivi from Pekanbaru. Please, Mark, would you like to also comment and answer to these questions while giving some... Oh, before that, I see that, okay, Mr. Alfian also has a question, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the second opportunity for me to ask the question. Advanced technology approaches are excellent in addressing the multi-hazard risk reduction efforts. However, transfer of technology or knowledge to the lay people is important. So I mean, that's the thing that should be, developed in the earlier stages of, development planning to promote or to facilitate the capacity building of the community, especially the vulnerable people in the remote areas. The second thing is that particularly for people who live in a small island, remote island, that really impacted by climate change due to the extreme weather that really influence the distribution of staple food or distribution of a basic need of food to the islanders. So I think that the most important thing for those who live in the island is that how to strengthen their like alternative food banks, like increasing their capacity or skill to develop their kind of like small scale agricultural practices to support their basic needs once the extreme weather happens, like that influence or that affects their distribution of food to the island. That's the thing that I would like to kind of ask the feedback or opinion from the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, that's a very relevant question. So that's again the interrelation of topics. So of course, the climate change will also have impacts on the food production in several areas, and as you said, for the fishers communities as well on the systems. I will now give the floor to the different panelists for their closing words. Maybe they can also answer these different questions, including the one of the illegal destruction of ecosystems, which is not only a problem in Indonesia, but that's something we heard in other parts also, for instance, the destruction of mangroves. Mark, would you like maybe to give some?
Sorry, Pascaline, can I take the floor for 1 minute because I have to leave you at 11
please,
for another meeting. Just to say that I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you to all of you. Regarding informal issues, informal settlement, this is something very important, and maybe Pascaline, next time we can talk about it from the technical point of view and also from socio-economic point of view for these issues, because it concerns many countries, and we can open this webinar to other people from other part of the world who are involved in this relation between resilience and informal issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent closing remark. You're entirely right that the question of informal settlements and the impacts of climate change is going to be one of the major issues. So we welcome your initiative and proposal. Thank you, Youssef. So now, please, Mark, if you would like to share your closing remarks.
What I would say is that there is a question of solidarity that is very fundamental, and the solidarity can be natural or can be organized. And I think that when we are dealing with the protection of the mangrove, for example, it has to be organized, and people that are doing some bad actions on the mangrove should let these activities for some others that are better, and because it makes it can make things very difficult for some other people. So I think that basically there is a question of regulation and policies of this subject. It's right for the mangrove, but ordinarily it's the case also for urban planning. The reduction of the exposure to the hazard is something that is a priority compared to the construction or the reinforcement of levee systems. And the main point that appear in the special report of the IPCC is that we will increase the risk in the future, not only because the hazard will increase, but because the exposure will increase. So we can't have any action, or it's a global action that is needed to reduce the hazard, to reduce the phenomena, but we can have an action to reduce the exposure. And we have a few decades to have strong actions to reduce the exposure. So these problems need really to be tackled very early. And there are some action as the protection of mangrove, but also to reduce, for example, the silence in Jakarta, stop water extractions, and we can remember to this picture of Arup. If everybody can have a free access to water, it's strange, but for this reason we can reduce the risk in the future. So things are not simple. Every territory is different, and so we need some people. The governments can have this role to have this reflection on the long term, and to take measures that will make society more to give more solidarity in the society.
Thank you. That's a very good point. The question of solidarity, especially at the international level, we see how difficult it is in this question of climate. So let's as you say, it is one really important and key part of the adaptation and the resilience. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, Vishnu, would you like to give a really short closing remark?
Yeah. So I think one question that was the illegal logging. I think a lot of these things happen there. I think the political economy of the entire situation is kind of something that we need to consider in terms of whether it is whether there's a positive action taking place, there's a negative action taking place some other side. I think the role of institutions, in some sense, in India, you have the National Green Tribunal, you have several institutional judicial avenues available. So from the coastal management side, you have state coastal authority, district coastal authority, there are forums and committees that are formed. It is not perfect, but I think the avenues where we can, when communities can access and also participate better in those forums are very important. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vishnu, for answering this important question. And I'm happy now to hand the floor over to Mr. Arif Wibowo, if you'd like to give some closing remarks.
Yes, thank you
Yes,
once
thank
again, Pascaline. Colleagues, it's a great time for us to have this event. I think it's good for us also to continue, especially our colleagues from the 10 cities as a part of the pilot projects, by the help of our experts from EU. I think it's let's work together closely, and then we very open to discuss in more detail. Please contact with us if you need some clarification, and we appreciate for your involvement in this pilot projects. The 10 cities, I think, is good for us how to put into action, because we still have 4 years to go, and hopefully we can use this as a challenge for us, opportunity for us to be to achieve our commitment to the Paris Agreement, especially. So, and thank you very much, everybody, for this support, and for the next going on projects. Thank you, Pascaline, and other colleagues, and once again, good morning, good evening, selamat sore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arif Wibowo. It was really an honor to have you. As you said, we are only at the beginning of the project, but still it is good that we have this exchange with the pilot cities and with you and with the experts. I take the opportunity to thank our keynote speaker, all the panelists for their participation, also for because you are all very busy persons, so we really realize that it is time that you are giving to the CRIC project. We would like to thank the participants from the CRIC project, our president, also Dr. Bernadia Tchanablaoui for participating, the team at UCLG ASPAC, so Ari, Putra, and Maria for helping us to organize this meeting. I would like also to thank my colleague Emmanuel Rivera, and maybe Emmanuel, you can also say hi, because you were also organizing this event.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It's been a pleasure to see so many people attending this event, and we look forward to organizing more and meeting more of you.
So I see there were other questions. Sorry that we need to close this workshop, because we said we would be closing at 5 p.m. for you. But I really encourage you to write your questions to Emmanuel so that we will communicate them to the speakers and panelists. And I'm sure that this discussion is only the beginning, that there will be more and more, and hope there will be more and more research on the integrated approach to climate adaptation, including in coastal areas, but not only. And there will be not only more research, but hopefully more actions, more development, and more adaptation. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Sorry,
yes,
sorry, Pascaline.
Yes,
sorry to interrupt.
Please.
Sorry. So I just wanted to thank all of the presenters on behalf of the UCLG Spark as well as the great teams. I would like to thank to all, especially the Developer Day for facilitating this event, and also to Pak Arifi Bowo on behalf of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and also all participated members of the pilot cities. I would like to thank you all for joining this event. So hopefully we will see you again in the near future in the similar type of the events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I wish you all a very good day. Thank you, and we'll meet again soon. Yes, please, Maria.
Can I have a second for a photo shoot session? Is it okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sure.
Okay, right. So
sure, you're really welcome. There will be a session this afternoon. If it's not too late for you, you're really welcome to join.
Yes. Mungkin Bapak dan Ibu bisa minta tolong untuk diaktifkan fitur videonya supaya saya bisa gambar. So Mark and everyone, please could you please turn on the video? So I'm going to screenshot the screen. Okay.
I would just like to say thank you also to all the city representatives in Indonesia. It is really very, very nice for us to see the enthusiasm and the commitment that is coming also from the cities. And it is a great, great encouragement for our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Okay, could you please wait for 3 seconds and smile? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thanks also to the interpreters. Thanks, Maria. And have a good day, everybody. Looking forward to further discussions and cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you.